Rhea Kapoor, a bright Indian student chasing her American dream, and David Carter, a married Los Angeles millionaire with everything to lose, entered a forbidden affair that spiraled into a $5 million visa scam until Evelyn Carter, his vengeful wife, stepped in and turned their secret into a deadly hotel bloodbath. Rhea Kapoor had grown up in Mumbai with big dreams of making a life abroad, and when she was accepted into a graduate program in Los Angeles, it felt like the first step toward everything she had ever wanted. Her parents had scraped together their savings to send her, believing their daughter would thrive in America, but the reality of her new life was far from the glossy image she had built in her head. Her classes were demanding, rent was sky-high, and the constant pressure of maintaining her student visa gnawed at her. Every passing day brought her closer to the moment when her visa would expire, and the fear of being forced to return home without having achieved anything became her shadow. It was during this time of uncertainty that Rhea's life took a turn she could never have anticipated. Through a friend from university, she was invited to a high-profile charity gala at a Beverly Hills hotel. The event was dazzling, filled with chandeliers, champagne, and a sea of glittering gowns. Rhea, dressed in a borrowed evening dress, felt like an outsider until her eyes met David Carter's across the room. He was much older, in his 50s, with a commanding presence that drew attention wherever he went. Known in Los Angeles as a real estate millionaire, David lived in the kind of world Rhea had only seen in magazines. He approached her with charm that seemed effortless, asking about her studies, her life, her family back in India. Rhea, flattered and nervous, found herself opening up more than she expected. David was attentive, listening closely, and he spoke in a way that made her feel important, as though she was in tea, just another student trying to get by in a city that often felt indifferent to her struggles. By the end of the evening, he had given her his number, insisting they meet again for dinner. She hesitated but agreed, drawn in by the allure of being noticed by someone so powerful. Their meetings quickly became more frequent. David took her to expensive restaurants, booked suites in luxury hotels, and showered her with gifts she never could have afforded on her own. For Rhea, it felt intoxicating, a whirlwind of attention and luxury far removed from the cramped apartment she shared with two other international students. Rhea told herself it was harmless, that he was simply a mentor who saw potential in her, but deep down she knew it was more. She was falling into an affair with a married man, a man who promised her things she desperately wanted to believe. David, for his part, was enthralled by her youth and vulnerability. To him, Rhea was a distraction from the monotony of his marriage to Evelyn, a glamorous socialite who had grown tired of his wandering eye, but still maintained their perfect facade for the public. With Rhea, he felt alive again, able to indulge in fantasies of control and power. He began to speak of helping her stay in the country, hinting at his connections and influence. For Rhea, who lived in constant fear of her visa running out, those words were like oxygen. What started as stolen evenings of passion soon became entangled with promises of security. Rhea began to believe David could be her lifeline, the key to everything she had been chasing. Yet beneath the sparkle of his world lurked shadows she could not yet see. Evelyn Carter, sharp-eyed and calculating, had already begun to notice the shift in her husband's behavior. And David himself was not the savior Rhea imagined, but a man whose wealth and charm masked a history of deceit. What Rhea thought was the start of a dream was, in reality, the beginning of a trap that would close in tighter with each passing day. David Carter had perfected the art of making impossible promises sound effortless. He knew exactly what Rhea Kapoor wanted to hear, and with every meeting, he fed her hope. He spoke casually about his influence in Los Angeles, how he had helped friends secure green cards before, and how his connections within immigration circles could make her situation disappear. Rhea, caught between desperation and infatuation, wanted to believe every word. Her student visa was slipping away, and the thought of returning to India in defeat haunted her. David's reassurances felt like lifelines, and she clung to them, ignoring the unease that occasionally flickered in her mind. The plan he eventually laid before her seemed both daring and dangerous. He suggested arranging a marriage on paper only with one of his business associates who, for the right price, would go along with it. He framed it as a common practice, nothing unusual in the city's underworld of immigration loopholes. Rhea hesitated, but David's calm tone and promises of safety dulled her fear. He told her that once she had permanent residency, she could build a real life, free of stress and uncertainty. It sounded like everything she had dreamed of since arriving in Los Angeles. Money, however, became the first obstacle. David explained that the process would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, perhaps more. Rhea panicked. There was no way she could produce that kind of sum. But David leaned in, assuring her he would cover the costs for now. He spoke of it as an investment in her future, subtly reminding her of the debt she would owe him in return. And the gifts, the dinners, the hotel suites, suddenly they weren't free acts of affection. They were tools to keep her bound to him. Rhea began to notice the shift. David was more controlling now, checking on her constantly, demanding to know where she was, and insisting she'll rely only on him. He reminded her of the risk she was taking and hinted at the consequences of betraying his trust. The warmth that had first drawn her in began to cool into something menacing. Still she stayed, trapped between fear of losing her visa and the intoxication of his attention. Meanwhile, Evelyn Carter, his wife, was piecing the puzzle together in silence. She had always known her husband strayed, but this time was different. Bank statements revealed massive transfers routed through shadowy companies, timed suspiciously close to when David began seeing Rhea. Evelyn also discovered a jewelry purchase addressed directly to Rhea. What struck Evelyn most was not the affair itself, but the scale of deception surrounding it. David was not simply unfaithful, he was entangled in something that could destroy them both. Rhea remained unaware of just how deep she had stepped into David's world. To her, the plan was a risky but necessary gamble for her future. To David, it was business as usual, another scheme to expand his wealth and control while keeping his double life hidden. For Evelyn, it was the opening she needed to uncover her husband's darkest secrets. None of them knew yet that the web of lies was already tightening, and that one wrong move would transform their entanglement from fraud into something far deadlier. Rhea Kapoor's excitement over the promise of security began to fade when the cracks in David Carter's plan became impossible to ignore. At first, she had trusted his words, convincing herself that the oddities in his behavior were just the quirks of a man protecting her future. But as weeks passed, she noticed things that didn't add up. The so-called intermediaries David introduced her to seemed evasive, unwilling to provide paperwork or clear explanations. Meetings were always in hotel lounges or coffee shops, never in offices. The conversations revolved around money, never legal steps. Each time Rhea asked for proof of progress, she was brushed off with vague assurances. Her unease turned to alarm when she accidentally overheard David on the phone one evening. He was speaking harshly, demanding that someone deliver the next payment before things fell apart. His tone was sharp, nothing like the protective man he showed her. The words sent a chill down her spine. She began to wonder if she was not the only one. Digging quietly, Rhea searched online forums late at night, looking up stories of fraudulent visa schemes. What she read mirrored her own situation. Wealthy men promising solutions, demanding money, leaving victims stranded when the schemes collapsed. The realization cut deeply. She wasn't David's beloved, she was his pawn. He had dangled hope in front of her only to exploit her desperation for his gain. The gifts, the dinners, the whispered promises, all part of a performance designed to keep her compliant. Rhea felt betrayed, trapped between the fear of deportation and the horror of what she had stumbled into. She knew if she confronted David directly, he might retaliate. The man she once thought charming now seemed capable of anything. In her desperation, Rhea made a bold and dangerous choice. She reached out to Evelyn Carter. She had debated for days, torn between shame and survival, but finally, she sent an anonymous message asking Evelyn to meet. When they sat face to face, Rhea confessed everything: the affair, the promises of a marriage arrangement, the money, and the growing suspicion it was all a scam. Evelyn listened silently, her face betraying little, but her mind was racing. She had long suspected David's infidelity, yet this was different. Rhea's story unveiled not just betrayal of their marriage, but a criminal operation that threatened to drag their entire world into ruin. Evelyn's anger simmered as she pieced together her husband's double life, but beneath her fury was a calculated calm. She realized she held the power now, not David. Rhea, trembling and near tears, begged for help. hoping Evelyn might expose him. What she didn't realize was that Evelyn's hatred for David had been growing for years, and this revelation was the final blow. David, however, was already growing suspicious. He noticed Rhea becoming distant, her questions more pointed, her compliance slipping. He began to monitor her movements more closely, hiring someone to track her when she was away. When he discovered she had met Evelyn, his paranoia ignited. His empire was at risk, and to him, both women now represented danger. Rhea thought she had found an ally in Evelyn. She believed she had taken the first step toward escaping David's control. What she could not know was that exposing his secrets would only push him closer to violence. The walls of deceit were closing in, and the fragile line between fraud and murder was about to shatter. The tension surrounding David Carter reached its breaking point when he arranged a private meeting at a luxury hotel in downtown Los Angeles. He told Rhea Kapoor it was to finalize her visa deal, to finally deliver the papers she had been begging for. In truth, it was a trap. David had convinced himself she was conspiring against him, and the involvement of his wife Evelyn confirmed his fears. To him, this wasn't about love or betrayal anymore. It was survival, and anyone threatening his empire needed to be silenced. Rhea arrived at the hotel dressed carefully, her nerves frayed but her hopes still intact. She clutched a folder of documents she had compiled, copies of transactions, messages, and notes she planned to use as leverage if David tried to dismiss her again. She imagined confronting him with evidence, demanding the truth. She still believed, in some fragile corner of her heart, that he might come clean, apologize, and end the deceit. But as she stepped into the suite, she felt the atmosphere shift. The curtains were drawn, the lights dimmed, and David's expression was nothing like the affectionate man she once knew. His jaw was tight, his eyes cold, his tone clipped as he ordered her to sit. Across town, Evelyn Carter was making her own move. She had followed David that evening, intent on exposing him once and for all. She had brought with her a concealed recording device and a determination hardened by years of betrayal. Evelyn had no intention of rescuing Rhea. Her goal was destruction. She wanted proof that her husband was running a scam, so she could ruin him both personally and publicly. The thought of humiliating him, of stripping away the polished image he had cultivated, consumed her more than any desire for justice. Inside the suite, the meeting spiraled quickly. David accused Rhea of betraying him, of conspiring with Evelyn. His words turned venomous as he paced the room, voice rising with each accusation. Rhea tried to defend herself, tried to explain that she only wanted the truth, but he wasn't listening. He grabbed the folder from her hands, rifling through the documents with trembling fury. In his mind, her notes weren't a plea for clarity, they were evidence that could end his carefully built life. When Evelyn burst into the room, recording device in hand, the scene erupted into chaos. She announced herself with cutting words, declaring she had enough to expose him. David's face drained of color as he realized the walls were closing in. The two women stood opposite him, one betrayed lover and one vengeful wife, united by rage and desperation. But unity quickly dissolved into panic when David lunged, shoved Evelyn, tried to snatch the recorder, then turned on Rhea when she screamed. Furniture toppled, glass shattered, and the polished suite transformed into a battlefield of betrayal. The violence escalated beyond control. Struggle near the minibar ended with a broken glass pressed against skin, blood staining the carpet. Shouts turned to gasps, and in the frenzy, David struck harder than he intended. The final blow left silence in the room, broken only by the hum of the city outside the window. In a single night, the lies, greed, and betrayals collided into irreversible tragedy. The hotel suite, once meant to symbolize power and secrecy, became a crime scene drenched in fear. What began as a promise of love and opportunity had twisted into a bloody reckoning that no one could escape. The hotel staff was the first to sense something had gone terribly wrong. Guests in neighboring rooms had called the front desk after hearing shouting and crashing noises, followed by an eerie silence. By the time security knocked on the door of the suite, David Carter was pacing the room, his shirt stained with blood, his breathing heavy. Rhea lay motionless near the coffee table, and Evelyn sat against the wall, trembling but alive, clutching her injured arm. When security forced the door open, the sight inside sent shockwaves through the staff. Within minutes, the police were called. The investigation moved quickly, given the high profile of the individuals involved. David Carter, a well-known millionaire in Los Angeles society circles, tried desperately to spin the scene in his favor. He claimed it was a lover's quarrel gone wrong, an accident that spiraled out of control. But detectives were not convinced. They found Evelyn's recording device on the floor, still intact, capturing much of the confrontation before the struggle turned violent. On the tape, David's threats, his anger, and his intentions were chillingly clear. Rhea Kapoor, the young student who had come to America with dreams of success, became the heart of the case. Her death wasn't just a tragic loss, it was evidence of a pattern of exploitation. Investigators dug into David's financial records and uncovered a disturbing trail. Payments from multiple women, all with backgrounds similar to Rhea's, all promised security in exchange for money or loyalty. What had started as whispers of infidelity now grew into a full-blown scandal, painting David as the mastermind of a web of fraud built on broken promises and desperation. Evelyn, though deeply scarred by the events of that night, became a crucial witness. Her testimony, supported by the recording, revealed not just her husband's criminal schemes, but also the years of manipulation and control she had endured. Yet her motives were not entirely pure. Detectives soon realized that Evelyn hadn't stepped in to save Rhea out of compassion. She had sought revenge. She admitted that she wanted to destroy David, to see him humiliated, even if it meant dragging others down with him. This revelation added another layer of complexity to the case, leaving jurors and the public torn between sympathy and suspicion. The trial became a media spectacle, with reporters swarming the courthouse and headlines dissecting every detail. The narrative of a powerful millionaire exploiting vulnerable women, of a wife's revenge intertwining with a lover's tragedy, captivated the city. Prosecutors painted David as a predator who manipulated everyone around him for profit and control. His defense argued it was passion, a crime of heat, not premeditated murder. But the evidence was damning. Financial records, testimonies from other women, and the haunting audio of Rhea's final confrontation. In the end, David was convicted of murder and fraud, his empire collapsing under the weight of his crimes. Evelyn, though spared legal charges for her role, lived with the knowledge that her thirst for revenge had indirectly fueled the deadly chain of events. She withdrew from public life, her once glamorous world replaced with shadows of guilt. For Rhea Kapoor, her story became a cautionary tale told in whispers across student communities in Los Angeles. She had come seeking opportunity, but fell into the clutches of a man who saw her vulnerability as profit. Her death was not just the result of a crime, it was the tragic end of a dream twisted by lies, greed, and betrayal. The hotel suite remained sealed for weeks, a grim reminder of the night when an affair, a scam, and a marriage all collided in bloodshed. To outsiders, it was a shocking true crime. To those who knew the players, it was the inevitable unraveling of lives built on deception.